Picture Book Summit. Picture Book Summit. Picture Book Summit.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Please welcome Julie Andrews and Emma Walton Hamilton. Go ahead and come on camera when you are ready. Welcome. It's so lovely to see you.
Betty.
Hello.
Hi again.
Hello.
This is Mum, in case you didn't know.
Yeah.
Hello,
Always
Mom.
referred to as Mum.
We're again happy to have you here. Just let me tell the audience a little bit about your background in case they don't know. This team, these two, have written over 30 books for children, including 9 New York Times bestsellers. And you guys probably want to know the secret to their success. Julie Headland is going to be our proxy. She's going to come on and ask all of those questions. Many of these questions, again, were pulled from you in the Facebook group, and we've come up with some that we wanted to know as well. So we're looking forward to this session. Thank you so much for being here. And I will throw it to you, Julie. Let's get started.
Yes, the Julie thing has become an occupational hazard of sorts lately. But
you can refer to me, as we just said earlier, I'm Mum. So if you get, if anybody gets,
just say Mum.
Yeah, just say Mum if you get confused.
in American English, Mum means don't say anything.
Right.
That's true.
Anyway, I want to get started right away because I know we have a lot of questions. We're going to get more, and I know how excited everybody is to hear from you. The first question I want to ask is, beyond the obvious, i.e. being related, how did you two become writing partners?
Want to start?
I'll start, yeah. Actually, the first time we became writing partners, I was 5 years old, and we both love stories. We both love reading. We both love writing. And when I was 5 years old and my mom and dad were newly divorced and living on separate coasts, Mom had the idea that because my father was an artist, if we wrote a story together and I brought it to my father when I went to visit him, he could illustrate it, and then she would have the book bound as a memento of our family unity despite the distance and despite the divorce. And that little story, which I still have, later became the root material, the source material for one of our books, Simeon's Gift. So we saved it. She did have it bound. We saved it, and there it is now in print.
Not the same at all.
Not the same, no, but some elements the same.
Yep.
So we did have that little piece of writing together history in our background. And then, of course, we had partnered creatively. We had acted together in films, and Mom made her directorial debut at the theater that my husband and I ran. But I'll hand it over to you for how we started writing
the
books.
First book that we wrote together was presented, sort of handed to us in a way. My publishers at the time were talking with me about a memoir that I was thinking of doing. And everybody came in, all the other people in the publishing, in the children's book world came in and said hello, and I was introduced. And one of the ladies said, "Do you have anything for very small children?" And I said, well...
Because you had actually written Mom wrote many people may know, she wrote 2 middle grade novels.
Yes.
Mom actually wrote 2 middle grade novels in the 1970s, and so she was established already as a children's author.
Yeah, but I hadn't done anything for very small children. So I said, let me think about it. And I went home to Emma and said, Emma, if you took your son Sam to the library, what would be the book that you'd most want to try to find? And you said?
It would have to be about trucks.
Yes.
Because he was a truck fanatic, which we'll show you a picture of later. And I couldn't find enough great, themey, character-driven,
cozy, comfy family stories.
Yeah, they were all kind of nonfiction, and I was reading the same books over and over and over every night, as we do. So she said, well, let's try writing it together.
Yeah, and it was a great leap of faith, and we weren't sure that we'd be compatible, but we were. And
that was 26 years and 35 books
ago. Yeah.
Wow. So the next question then is, what's it like to have a writing partner? How does it work? And do you have a routine that you stick to?
Sort of.
Yeah, we do. We tend to get together roughly the same time every day when we are on a deadline.
We start with, once we've landed on the idea that we love.
We're outliners. That's an important thing to state.
Yeah.
Not everybody is, but we always outline first. We like to have a map to know where we're going.
Yeah, and what's important to keep focusing on and what needs to be remembered.
And then we like to be together in person if we can be. So generally I come here to Mom's house and we write at the dining room table.
Yeah, originally it wasn't together, was it? I was in California and you were here. But
that was, we did a lot by phone in the early days, and that was rough on our necks.
Yeah.
Once we have an outline to work from, we sort of just finish each other's sentences by writing out loud. So one of us will start imagining what the opening line will be, and the other one will chime in, and we'll go back and forth, and then taking dictation as we go, so to speak.
Yes, thank goodness, because I'm not very good at that.
That's a very good segue into the next question, which is, what are your different strengths? What do each of you bring to the table that's unique?
You start.
I think, obviously, I draw on my knowledge of theatre and film, and I use that as, in a way, that's my strength, because I imagine the opening of something or the end of a chapter or picture in my head. I mean, it's mostly always theatrical or cinematic for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's definitely, Mom has the great instincts. She's the one who comes up with the great one-liner or the interesting character or the unique POV or something like that. I'm the nuts and bolts person, because I now teach.
Yeah.
And because I took myself back to school and got my own MFA in creative writing, I'm all about the structure, and I'm the one that kind of keeps reminding us about those pieces.
This is a totally unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Julie, do you have a favorite of the books that you and Emma have written?
Oh, goodness.
Totally unfair.
They're all fairly different. We've done probably more picture books than anything else, but we've done some children's middle grade novels and early readers and everything. So I don't know which is my favorite. I know what's hard is when you switch from one to the other. For instance, if you're doing a picture book, it's extremely defined. You know that you're doing 32 pages and that you can't have that many words. What is it, darling? Usually 1,000 or?
Well, now it's
500.
500, yeah.
No more than 500 words. And then when you finally get to doing something like a children's novel, a middle grade novel, suddenly any amount of verbiage will do. And it's difficult sometimes to open up your mind to more rather than less.
That's true.
And so where you mentioned once you get an idea and you love it, then you give it your all. But where do you get those ideas, and how do you develop them into stories? And can you share, this is like a triplicate question here, and could you also share what your research and revision process is like? So that's a lot.
It is a lot, but luckily we were prepared for this question, and I do have a little slideshow presentation.
This is our first one.
So our first set of ideas came from my kids, believe it or not, Mom's grandkids. So we mentioned earlier about the trucks. There is my son, Sam, at a very young age with his truck t-shirts, and he was a complete truck fanatic. So that was the source.
Particularly dump trucks and
dump trucks especially, yeah.
Yes.
So he was the inspiration for our first book. And this was our inspiration. This is my daughter, Hope, who is our inspiration for our second series, The Very Fairy Princess. Hope was a very fairy princess from the minute she could stand, as you can see from these photographs. So, but she was also socks around her ankles, scrapes on her kneecaps, and dirty fingernails.
And
so
very opinionated.
Yeah,
what she knew about herself already.
So she was the source of ideas for our Very Fairy Princess series. Now we'll jump forward to some of our more recent books. The idea for the first notes, the story of Do Re Mi, which came out this time last year, actually came to us from my son's music teacher, guitar teacher. And she was the person who introduced us to Guido d'Arezzo and said the solfege was invented by this Benedictine monk by the name of Guido. And
That's the do re mi scale. Yeah.
that's the do re mi scale. And our first idea, and this was about 20 years, maybe 15, not quite 20 years ago,
Yeah.
was to use the song as a kind of a how-to book that would help kids understand the nature of music. This was a very misguided idea. You can see that we made a little dummy, and we basically had this idea that there would be the song as the main text and then these pop-up boxes with all this overabundance of information. You can see our learning curve in action here, but way wrong idea. And of course this
Over busy.
Yeah, this was soundly rejected by several different publishers. So then eventually we got the idea of turning it into a biography and doing some research about Guido himself and really treating it as a picture book biography.
And
So
Guido as a young man and how he grew to and what his love of life contained, which was music.
Right.
Yeah.
So we did a deep dive into research and found there's not actually a great deal known about Guido. There's a few things known. So we read a ton of books. We went and consulted online.
And he was a Benedictine monk, and
He
we
was.
had to find out all about what his.
Well, that's coming.
Yeah, no, sorry. Getting a little bit ahead
Getting
of
ahead of
myself
us, yeah. We hired a couple of consultants in Italy, historians who specialized in this era. We had to, of course, research the abbey where he was raised and educated. So we reached out to them and we got a ton of information and research materials and photographs and so forth from them. And then we had to study all about what it took to become a Benedictine monk, because generally speaking, they started out as young children, as Guido did. The abbeys functioned as boarding schools, essentially. So we had to figure out what his daily life would have been like then, because it wasn't given in any of the information about him specifically. So we had to look for it elsewhere. We made a big list of words that we knew, because it was a book about music, we needed to be as lyrical as possible with our writing. So we wanted to incorporate music-related words into our syntax, into our verbiage. And so we made lists upon lists of words that we might be able to use that would have double entendres and have a musical feel to them while storytelling. And then we wrote our first draft of the biography, which was inappropriately titled Guido's Song, possibly the worst title ever for any picture book. But you can see we were still using the idea of the do re mi song to get us into it. And then we overwrote this very long, overly technical in terms of the day-to-day life of monks version of the story. And then we consulted with these Italian Middle Ages specialists.
Yep.
This particular piece of information came to us from the woman who runs the Abbey of Pomposa, which is now a museum. She's the historian there. And when we sent the story to her for fact checking, this is just one of her facts where she said, this is completely wrong. Pomposa was an island. You can't call it a town in those days. It would be better to call it something else. So we changed the word to community. And there were many other of those.
Examples,
and you can see that
yeah.
we've put in illustration notes here, because by this time we were already in dialogue with a publisher about how this might lay out. This is the finished product. And you can see that the song has now been incorporated in a letter from the authors at the beginning of the book and not into the story itself, although it does reappear at the end of the book. So this solved a lot of problems for us. We got a lot of the educational component of the solfege out of the way up front with an author's note. And then we were able to jump right into the story. And you can see our process here. So on the left in the pop-out box in white is the first draft of what ended up on this page. And you can see that we've tightened it considerably, edited it down, and some of that information about the library and the ancient books and so forth comes up later in the story. So it wasn't necessary to have it all on the first page. One of the things that we love most about this page is that our illustrator, who is Italian, Chiara Fedele, and we wrote this during COVID, so it's terribly important that we have an Italian illustrator who could go to the Abbey and actually visit these places, because
And
we
she
couldn't.
did, yeah. Yeah.
But you can see in this illustration that there is a little nod to the song in a few places. If you look closely under this cypress tree over in the far right corner, there's a little deer poking his head out. There are some monks that are sewing. There are some monks sipping tea. So there's
Where's
there's
the
a
one
little
sipping tea?
these little guys.
Oh,
here
yes, so
having
they
tea.
are.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's some nods to the song, secret nods to the song, and that's true throughout the book. There, the end papers have a little game in them that is relative to
They're
the song.
adorable. Yeah.
And this is the second spread, just so you can see how much revision went on in the editorial process. So first draft in the pop-out box on the left, and final draft.
We certainly did overwrite, didn't we?
We
Yeah.
did.
Mm.
And we generally do, and that's part of our process. And then we whittle down and whittle down. What do you
Yes,
say?
and we keep what we feel or hope is relevant.
Is essential. And
Yeah.
of course, once the sketches start coming in, that helps tremendously too. So you can see that we talk about certain things in the original draft that ended up in the artwork, and therefore we didn't necessarily need to include it in the final product. And then most recently, this book just came out a couple of weeks ago. This is The Enchanted Symphony, and that idea came from this image that you can see on the right, which is something that Mom found.
Yeah, I think I found it online or something.
Yeah.
I called Emma immediately and read the idea for this, which was, again, COVID. Was no theatres were filled, concert halls, no anything really. So a very enterprising young man decided to bring every single plant that he could find into the theatre, and then you can see every seat, every box, every balcony is filled with the plants, and it so struck me as a perfect combination of all the things we love. We're great nature enthusiasts and garden enthusiasts, and yet
And theater enthusiasts.
and
music
love of
enthusiasts.
music. Yeah, and this is their little quartet. This is what actually happened in our book. It's a full orchestra, but what we thought it would make an interesting story, but we couldn't base it on COVID. We didn't want it to be timed to that and that alone, and so we kept thinking, well, what would cause someone to go and fill a theatre with plants, and what would the reason be, and so on. So we came up with the idea of, well, do you want to take that one, darling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we ended up writing this story about a strange fog that takes over this village and creates a kind of ennui and prevents
Lethargy
people from
and-
going out of their houses and so forth. And it's, rather than being symbolic of COVID, it's sort of symbolic of anything that threatens to distract us from the priorities of life and the things that matter most.
Dramatic.
Here comes Kelly. We're getting the hook.
Yes, we are.
No, honestly, you guys could just stay here all day. I'm never going to
That's
kick
my
you
fault,
out.
because I was supposed to close it down, but I think, like everybody else,
Thank
some book is just.
As you can see, we like to talk.
I do too. So it's among all of us. Anyway, thank you so much. It was just
Pleasure.
phenomenal. And you all have an amazing rest of your day. Emma, I'll see you again soon.
Yes, I'll see you all back at my own office in
We're gonna leave
in
you
short
alone.
order. I'm got to get back to work.
Thanks very, very much, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Bye.
Summit. Picture Book Summit. Picture Book Summit.